Hey, it's Caliban Coluccia, and this is How Long Would Spot, the promised dueling apocalypse episode, um, dealing with zombies versus COVID 19. Now, let's start dealing with zombies first, and I want to start by pointing out a button we've done here. Uh, the One Cut of the Dead button, which refers to a movie that we got interested in about a year ago. It was a Japanese made movie that made a bit of a record because it garnered in its first run 1,000 times the cost it cost to produce the movie, which is a big record. And of those people who are familiar with the zombie genre know that it began in modern times with George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, which was basically done on his credit card with a Super 8 camera and became this like monumental movie. And so there's something within that kind of energy within the zombie genre that leads us to believe that this may be, at a minimum, the penultimate entry in the zombie genre. Um, And we had really high hopes. This had come on the heels of Crazy Rich Asians and the idea that there would be a Hollywood remake in the English language of this movie. And we're still hoping that happens. And if there is, we have our button that will help promote it for free. And we have surprising results because nothing we've promoted has ever not succeeded. It's true. Now, let's deal with zombies. And, in all look at zombies, it comes to your zombie weapon of choice. And by the way, as let me introduce myself a little bit further. Caliban Coluccia. Some of you folks in the Marine Corps might remember me as Sweet Lucy. Some of you folks in uh, Bedford Stuyvesant might remember me as Carl Uzi. And some of you folks might know me as the Kensei of the One Sword and Three Heavens School of Bushido. I do about 80% of the artwork for Spots Buttons and about 30 to 40% of the copy behind Elizabeth, who does most of the copy, not the artwork. She actually doesn't draw very well. Um, this is Giles, and Giles is a Valcata, which was the weapon of choice in the Iberian Wars between the Carthage and the Romans, who used the gladius. And the falcata is a blade whose attitude of the blade is built along the neckline of attack, which means that while most people think the falcata can thrust, it's actually an inward cut along the neckline. And why this is important in zombies, and why this is important in understanding our response to a pandemic, is because it relates to mythology. Now, we're more of a heartline type person. And if you've watched science fiction or other type of science oriented programs, you've probably heard the statement, the heart. Why do people think that's the seat of the soul? It's just an efficient pump. I remember Phlox from Starship Voyager telling someone that. And the thing is, there's a story about Friar Mike. Mike lived during the Reformation, and he was the first medical scientist to document the cardiopulmonary system. And what he saw was the heart in the center of the lungs, somehow driving the fluid of blood through the sac of air, absorbing the pneuma of the spirit into the body. And this involved air, it involved fluid, as in the water of the blood. It involved earth, and he didn't even know there was iron in the blood. He knew it just involved the body, which heated up fire. Now, Friar Mike, it's like, how could this not be the seat of the soul? All the scientific evidence supports that fact. It does. And everything we know about science since then supports that fact. But in our society, we accept the zombie myth because the zombies are killed not by a stake through the heart, but a shot through the head, through the brain. And remember, the zombies, it's an infection that seems to animate the lowest, basest part of the skull, the animalistic part of the brain that just deals with physical wants and desires and immediate reactions, hunger, all this shit. But if you're gonna kill one, you shoot it through the frontal lobe where the identity exists. Because it's your identity and your intelligence, it's an awareness of life that makes you a human and not an animal. Therefore, your intelligence has replaced your soul within the common mythology, right? So this is what we talk about. This is the mythology, right? And the mythology, it's not a lie. As much as we like the Dolores from Westworld, when she says metaphor is lies, that's not what it means. Metaphor is how you understand what you cannot know. And understanding the full comprehension of life is understanding there are things that go beyond the ability of us to know. And therefore we need to know how to respond to them. And that's why we need mythology. And that mythology isn't failing us. Because the thing about zombies is that we all know the story. The world goes to crap. And people keep on their same patterns of greed, selfishness, all that bullshit that keeps them from cooperating in order to survive because they're doing the wrong things. Now, the most common, one of the most common mistakes that's not noticed about zombie apocalypse is that people defend a very limited amount of space necessary for their own immediate survival. Whether it's, the house in the original Night of the Living Dead or the prison in the first season of Walking Dead or the mall in the second movie, The Dawn of the Dead. All these things, it's about securing this little tiny space necessary for your survival, as opposed to an extended space of safe refuge for mankind. And that's the whole thing. If you look at it, in the Revolutionary War, one specific advantage that colonials had over the British was that they marched on average, and this over a few days' time, a day or two time, they march on average 3 miles an hour, while the British marched 2. Now, I'd figure zombies at most maybe 4 miles? Probably not. They're probably slower than the British. And so that means that if you really want extensive security, you need to go beyond your limited space and secure a safe environment, a zombie-free environment, going at least 24 to 50 miles beyond your immediate zone. In other words, you have to protect yourself beyond that. Now, if you look at it, what's happening with masks, you have masks and testing, I should say. You have the White House. Trump appears without a mask. But that requires testing, extensive testing of the hundreds of people that go to supporting the White House. And things that, the per capita testing of the White House is probably not even a per capita, just plain testing that goes into securing the White House is probably more testing that goes into securing a town like here in Charlottesville. So only like all these resources defending this small area while the virus grows around it. It's a reminiscence of the period of the Roman Empire. The early days of the Roman Empire, they secured a area that went from Persia to Britain with only 250,000 troops. That's like impossible by today's standards. And as soon as it became, and they did that by protecting their frontiers so that the security was in their whole sphere of influence. But as soon as it became necessary for the security to surround itself around the emperor, it became necessary to have a larger army that centralized around him. And when they lost, they got their ass kicked. He ended the last emperor of the Western Roman Empire, ended his days serving as a footstool so this barbaric leader could get on the horse anytime he wanted to. Because that doesn't work. You have to expand and secure the whole area. You have to make it possible not for you to survive, but for humanity to survive. And juxtapose that by the way the White House has put all the influence, all the testing that's gone into protecting one man. And that man is terrified of catching the virus. That's a problem, right? Now, I'm going to need to cut this short because we only have about 2 more minutes left. The thing is that the failure of the zombie myth, and really, Walking Dead, we gave up on it the episode before Glenn died, because the thing is it keeps going back to this same idea that somehow man has to strive to understand that competition is not as advantageous as cooperation. And yet you still have, these assholes like, what's his name, Nigel, or whatever the fuck it is, Niger, 6 years into a zombie apocalypse, these assholes won't exist. But the common wisdom is that people who work on short-sighted basis do get by. But that's only because of our system. As soon as the power grid goes down, as soon as systems start collapsing, the people who thrive by taking advantage of the system will have no advantage. Bullies don't exist except within civilization. This is the biggest lie that civilization has ever fed you. Before it existed, bullies were not as much a problem because everyone knew how to hunt and everyone knew how to kill.